start right away? Should we go for it? Or should I wait another? Because it's technically, on my clock it's 10:30, not 10:31. That's why I was hesitant to start, but I'll start.
Either way is fine.
So good morning and good afternoon to everyone, because I hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe. I know everyone's at home, I imagine, or most people are. Anyways, we're here for, I think what is the seventh, if I'm not mistaken, the seventh event of this colloquium series on reciprocal learning in times of crisis, which brings together scholars and emerging scholars and activists from the Dadaab camps and Kakuma camps in Kenya, as well as scholars and the community of the Faculty of Education here at York, as well as bridges other organizations and community actors in Toronto and globally, actually, as well. So it's what is really an incredible space, I think, for interconnection, right? And for thinking about globality, like the globe as well, and the world that we live in, and how some of these issues, specifically with regards to COVID, but not necessarily just with regards to COVID, how all of these issues interact and interlink, and how there are several perspectives that emerge basically from our conversations, which are, I think, of interest here, and complexify issues as well many times, and are thinking about issues. So today, the main theme of the talk will be the racialized implications of COVID-19 in Toronto, and it's specifically from an East African perspective. And so we have an incredible array of speakers, I think, and all of them really young. So that's beautiful as well. So a lot of young people as well speaking to the topic. And I will introduce them in a second. Just before that, I just wanted to say a few words about myself. So my name is Mirko Stella, for those of you who do not know me. I'm a PhD candidate here at the Faculty of Education. I'm an international student, actually. So I'm from Italy originally, although I've actually had several instances in my youth of displacement and migration. So I mean, I've lived in many different countries due to a variety of reasons. I've been working for the last few years, and my research is also based on the BEAR project, which is Borderless Higher Education for Refugees project, which is one of it is the space that in a sense gives sort of initiates these colloquium series. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of working side by side with many graduate students, so master's students mostly in the Dadaab and Kakuma and the refugee complexes in Kenya. And I keep working alongside them as a teaching assistant, and I help them sort of work on their major research proposals. And so it's been really an incredible experience in the last 3 years for me to work side by side with all of them. Yeah, so that's how I entered the space in a sense of there, and that's how I've entered, I guess, the space of the colloquium series as well. So that said, I did want to just say sort of an opening quote, in a sense. I wanted to put out there an opening quote for today's session, because it is about the racialized implications of COVID-19 in Toronto. And I did want to just start off with, very quickly, in our programs, actually, in BEAR, in one of the courses that I teach, we usually use Omi and Wynant, one of their articles, basically from 2005, which I found is still incredible in the way that it is able to articulate, I think, the meaning of race today, right? And I mean, it's written in 2005, but I think it really is quite important in this piece today, and it is able to really reconstruct the different meanings that we have, right, of this complex idea. And all to say that what I did want to get at is that to say that Blackness and whiteness today are not meaningful in any essential way does not mean that the aspects of social identity do not continue to signify in many ways. And I think this has been also the driving force of my work as well, and with BEAR. And I know that this is one of the driving forces behind the work that many of our incredible speakers do today. And so I will now just quickly introduce all of them, and then I will leave the floor to them to actually probably fill in the blanks, in a sense, because I might have missed a lot of interesting aspects as well. I have just very few lines, and then I'll leave you with the possibility to enrich the. So today we have 4 speakers. We have Kerto Ahmed, And Kerto, you can correct me if I might get the pronunciation wrong sometimes. So please do correct me if I make any mistakes. And that goes for everyone. And Kerto is, sorry, Kerto, tell me.
Oh, sorry, I was
get
just
that right?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Kerto Ahmed, who is a fourth-year student at McMaster University studying life sciences, and she founded McMaster's first Black Students Association. Then we have Sam Tekle. Sam, did I say that right? Tekle?
Yeah, Tekle. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. And then from the University of Toronto, and he's an assistant professor of community engaged learning at New College at UFT. And his work focuses on Black and diaspora studies, urban studies, and the sociology of education. And then we have Ekram Maye. Ekram, again, if I made a mistake, please do point that out. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
My pronunciation? Okay, so Ekram Maye from Westview Centennial Secondary School. She is a 17-year-old student that currently attends Westview Centennial Secondary School, where she is currently completing her grade 12 year. Ekram is a past Success Beyond Limits mentee volunteer, and it currently is a Success Beyond Limits mentor. And then finally, we have Tesfai Mengesha. Tesfai, did I butcher that in any way? I hope not.
No,
Tesfai Mengesha, who is, I got it, thanks. Is the executive director of operations at Success Beyond Limits, a nonprofit based in the Jane and Finch community of Toronto that reimagines education and schools as sites of possibility. So these are the wonderful speakers that we have today, and I will leave that to them now. To maybe add a few things about themselves and about Success Beyond Limits as well. So that.
Thanks, Miracle. I'll start off. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. I'll just add a couple other things. I guess my background is also in teaching. So I'm also a teacher. Also have done some graduate work at York as well, as many of us have. And yeah, I grew up in the Jane and Finch community, which is really our community connection amongst all four of us. It's a community that we're all familiar with. And for those that are, not from Toronto, it's a part of Toronto, and it's in the northwest part of Toronto. So that's myself. And we were also going to just share, I guess, one interesting thing that we've kind of done since the pandemic, or that we've kind of picked up, is I guess my new activity of choice is cycling. So something that I'm doing new that I was not previously doing before the pandemic. So that's who I am.
For me, I'm Ekram. What I picked up over the break was baking. I did a lot of baking, so I'm very familiar with it, and I'm really enjoying it.
So, hey everyone. First of all, I'm going to be sending you my address, Ekram, so we can send over some baked goods. But other than that, I'm Sam. Yeah, so I with SBL, I teach in the summer program. We do research together. We try to bring attention to the kinds of things that our community members and students struggle with and work on, and we try to work on those kinds of things. And one thing I picked up is I take photos of the sunset every day on my balcony, and I do think I'm getting pretty good at it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kerto. Kherto. I mean, there's so many ways to say it, but something that I picked up during quarantining and the lockdown, I guess painting. I just found some sort of like therapy behind it. So definitely been working on it. Not no Bob Ross, but definitely working on getting there. So yeah.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, the one thing that connects all four of us is, of course, our connection to an organization called Success Beyond Limits, but also that we're all from the same community. We've all grown up there and have extensive experience within the education system within Jane and Finch, which is again in the northwest part of Toronto. And we wanted to start off before we get into a conversation, really just foregrounding it with kind of the work that we do. So everybody can kind of get an idea of what brings us together. So I'm just going to share a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see here. Okay. Great. So I'm just going to start off by talking about the work that we do, and it's really just a high level overview. We won't go in depth, but just so you get a sense of what SBL is and what we do. So let's start off by talking about how we're a youth-led organization. We consider ourselves a youth-led movement, and what that means for us is that youth are incorporated in every aspect of the organization, from the frontline staff to our governance, to our board directors, and they're part of the full decision-making process. And the journey that young people take through our organization starts really when they're as young as 13, and it goes all the way till they're in their 20s, and so that's why we consider ourselves a youth-led movement. We also consider our work very hyper-local with a systems focus. We'll share exactly where our work is done and why we consider very hyper-local on the next slide. But we also look at how do we have a greater impact beyond just our immediate community. And so for us, it's really taking the research that we do, and Sam might talk a bit about that, and use that to really impact various systems with the research that we do, and also the learnings that we get from our work. And our main goal is really to improve educational outcomes for young people, particularly in our community and also across the education system, especially those that whose education needs have not traditionally been met. And a big part of our work is exposure, right? Providing opportunities for young people to get access to resources and opportunities that are not directly necessarily within our immediate community, but are available in the broader city of Toronto. Okay, so this is just a map of where we do our work. So as we mentioned, we're all from a community in the northwest part of Toronto, Jane and Finch, and these are all kind of the sites of where our work happens. So you'll see Brookview Middle School and Oakdale Park Middle School. Those are kind of the two schools from grade 6 to 8 where we do our work. And those two schools feed into the local high school. You'll see on the bottom left, which is Westview Centennial, which is where we operate our youth space during the school year. And then during the summer, our work happens at Osgoode Hall Law School at York University. So we're really looking at building those connections between various transitions throughout young people's education, from middle school to high school, and then from high school on to post-secondary.
So I guess an aspect of the SBL program is heavily focused on the summer program itself. So the summer program is kind of centered around career exploration, academic development, as well as social development as well. And again, we are feeding in the schools from the neighboring middle schools, and we try to grab around 55 students each from Brookview and Oakdale. And we grab around 25 senior mentors from Westview who have been previous mentees as well. So you can start to see there's a cycle of the program where mentees now become mentors, volunteers, and then mentors, and then rec staff. So essentially the program is free for mentees, which is an amazing aspect because a lot of these programs are heavily expensive. So seeing a program that offers a high school credit, is free, and then allows you to be with your friends during the summer program is one of the eye-grabbing aspects for a mentee. So again, we are focused on not only having that fun aspects of trips and drama and dance and soccer and all that, we also do classrooms. So the first half of the program is focused around life skills, math, and I think it's English. I'm not too sure. But that's where we start to bring in teachers from the community. So they're familiar faces. Again, it's just trying to get the mentees more involved with the community and more involved with their peers and enjoy their summer.
So SBL has a school year program, which is a youth program that's located in the high school. And it's a youth space, a safe space where youth can come out throughout the day for support. They can come during classes, lunchtime, and after school for support. SBL also has an after school program that is a youth space that youth can come by. It's like a chill space, where a safe space where they can come get academic support. Like there's tutors available to help them out with their work. Me as a mentor as well, help them with their work and give them support. There's also like relationship building where everybody is like brother and sister relationship. Like SPL is like one big family where we all support each other. And yeah, and there's also youth employment where as me right now as a mentor, I am employed by SPL and I work in the after school space. Is a chance for me to work with the youth, get to know everybody, and get the experience. And we also provide snack during the after school program. And there's also a co-op credit, which is a high school credit, 2 credits that the students are able to gain. And yeah.
It might be important for context to think about where much of our work takes place. So in that northwest corner of the city, and which is very much far removed from the core of the city, where a lot of the resources are located, where a lot of the decisions that govern our lives and our young people's lives get made. Very often, and we work on this when Tess refers to speaking to like systems issues, they very often get made without our input or adequate consultation. Therefore, decisions get made and we are therefore left to live with the kinds of aftermaths, right? And living with that kind of, what I sometimes call it structured neglect and disinvestment, right? So then what happens with that kind of core periphery relationship is that much of our schools or our affordable housing towers or the kinds of public services and utilities we might rely on become degraded. And then they become especially creative industries. So during March break, which is a break for high school students in March that comes before the full rush up until the end of the school year in June, which at the post-secondary level, we might call it like a reading week. We've orchestrated or constructed a kind of week-long program that really exposes students to different career paths, to different career sites. We take them to, it happens downtown. So we go to the core of the city, we go to like one of the very fancy offices, we park up there and we post up there for a week and we run programming. We think about what does it mean to build a resume? What does it mean to have a professional self, professional identity? What does it mean to navigate that in a world where structured racism is a real thing? Structural racism, institutional racism, perhaps maybe even just a year ago, we wouldn't have been so easily to say these things out of our mouths. But these are things we try to work with our students to prepare them adequately and prepare them, one, to how to speak in the world that they're about to enter as adults, and then how that world might receive them. So some of the examples of some of the kinds of career sites we've gone to: Toronto Star, Mozilla, Shopify. We work with established artists. We've had, I think Des came one time, Desmond Cole came. We speak with writers, independent artists, photographers, stuff like that. So we arrange for them a kind of very informed reality check of what it might mean to move in the world with the bodies that they have, the identities that they have, the histories they bring, but also then how to do that. What are the kinds of tools we need? What are we up against? And then what's navigating it look like? And very often we also incorporate, we ask our alumni to come back. Kurto has come back and done workshops on post-secondary applications and course selections and the whole slew of things that it might mean to enter university or college when you're like the first one in your family to do that. So again, these are the kinds of things we've done. And then we also do a bunch of social excursions, like bubble soccer and things of that sort. So that's what we do during March break. And then we find it's a very important part. And we also work with middle school students. So those from, the 8th grade throughout all the high school years up to the post-secondary, and really get them to start thinking about their futures and how they might want to craft or mold those. So that's our March break career exploration program in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think so. We've kind of shared a high level overview of the work that we do. And I think, yeah, we can maybe go into a conversation around some of our experiences.
Absolutely, Tesfaye, and thank you all of you for that is a really wonderful introduction, I think, of the work that SBL does, and I think it really grounds us, it contextualizes the conversation that is about to happen. And I also contextualize, because we are working, because BEAR and because the Colloquium series is such a global space, like I was saying initially, I think you did a really good job of sort of reframing, okay, this is the context that we work in, right? But I think there are definitely patterns, and from what Sam was saying, for example, about the core periphery, the city of core periphery, I think this is something that we can think about, not just in terms of the city, but of the capitalistic city, but also in terms of like the world, right? In the way globalization works as well. So I think there's some really interesting elements there that we can maybe take up afterwards in conversation according to also the questions that emerge. But before that, like Tesfaye was saying, I think we do have some questions which I believe are from actually students in the DUB, if I'm not mistaken. And what I'll do is, Tesfaye, do you want me to read one question at a time, or how do we want to play this? Do you want me to read one question at a time, or do you want me to read all the questions at once, or how do you plan to engage with them?
However, whatever
Maybe
way you think.
Just one at a time.
One at a time? You want? Okay, we can proceed one at a time then. That's fine. So the first question, and I think these are, by the way, really great questions, because I think a lot of them are about questions of belonging as well, and about working within the social identities that many of you were speaking to, right? All of you were speaking to in your previous points. And so the first question that we have is, so why did you move to Canada? And what motivates you to stay in Canada? So that's the first question. I don't know who wants to take this question, but I'll open the floor.
I think I might have to take this one, as I wasn't born in Canada. I think I came when I was very young, so I didn't much get a vote. But I guess my parents were, I guess, political refugees, or so seeking, safety, security, and things of that sort was what informed their decision to move. First landing in Vancouver, where my first younger sister was born, and then eventually to Toronto. First at Bathurst and Bloor by Honest Eds, the first place we settled, and then to Jane and Finch, where the bulk of my life has been. Which also I would just want to add, we can also see the world from Jane and Finch. Yeah. So globalization is very much visible, most visible. I don't think in the core of the city of Toronto, but in Jane and Finch, right? So Tess, remember, I don't know if Kurto and Ikram are young enough, but you can go to the flea market at Jane and Finch Mall on Sunday and literally touch the world, see the world, sounds of the world, animals of the world, food of the world, music of the world, the languages of the world. You can go to many of the building we grew up in, 15 Tomory, which is just down the street from York, and see the world there, right? We could hear, on one floor, you knew that you could crisscross the Caribbean to the continent and back. So, and through Europe, who was sending barrels back? Which way was, who wanted to send money back? Who do we contact to do this? Which was the best way to travel? So I very much, that community, though politically and materially marginalized, it was a very worldly place.
And that's a really great way of putting it, actually, Sam. That's wonderfully put. The global in the local, and the local in the global, in a sense, right? And I agree that there's many elements that I don't know if you're the only one, I guess, Sam, that spoke to that, because everyone else is born in Canada, I imagine, right? That's why I don't. Anyone else want to add any comments? Tesfaye, I see you unmuted yourself. If you want to add anything, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, I think Sam's the only one that was not born in Canada. I think the rest of us were born in Canada. I think my travels were a little different. Sam landed in Vancouver. I was born in Montreal, so my first language was my native tongue of Tigrinya, and also French before I really started speaking English. But that's been kind of my journey, and then moving to Toronto at a very young age and growing up in the community. But I was born here, so I wasn't born abroad.
So I guess we can move then to the second question, which is, do you speak in your mother tongue, and how eloquent are you in your mother tongue? And again, I open the floor.
I guess I can take this one.
Yeah, go for it, Kirta.
So I do speak my mother's tongue. It's actually Somali. So again, being born here, you're not really exposed to the language, opposed to what your parents kind of speak, and being surrounded by the Somali culture and the people. But essentially, like, my mother does try to like incorporate into us, like, you need to learn your language, So she does try to incorporate, like, and again, like, I am the oldest of 7, so it does get a bit hard when it comes to trying to teach little kids a language that they don't know anything about. So they try to incorporate some contests and things like that to try to get us grasp onto the concept, and integrating the Somali language with the English, just to kind of get us to understand a little bit of it. But as I grown up, I guess, definitely grasp onto the language. So as I get older, I'm still learning, of course, but yeah.
Thank you, Kirta. Thank you so much. Anyone else wants to, I can't see, Ekram, there you go, I see you now. Go for it.
Yeah, so I as well, I do speak my mother's tongue. Um, it's at first it was kind of hard, but my mother would like always say a sentence in English. She would say, repeat it back to me in Somali instead of saying in English. And I also went back to um, my mother's country where she was born, and I stayed there for 6 months. So everyone spoke Somali, so like I kind of had to become fluent of it by kind of force because no one really knows English there. So yeah, I really picked up from that and from my home and my mother always telling us to, learn my tongue and
Absolutely. Thank you, Ekram. And I find interesting the fact that we're speaking about mother tongue, and both of you spoke about my mother. So it's an interesting connection there as well, right, between mothers and mother tongue. Anyways, just an interesting thought. That's all. So the next question is: so what aspects of your native traditional culture do you still practice in Canada? And again, anyone is welcome to take it. So go. Kerito, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Oh, yes, I have. So I guess coming back to the language, I think language is, again, an important aspect of culture. So just incorporating that as well. But I think it's just tradition in terms of the food that we eat, the languages that we speak, the small, like day-to-day life living. Have been incorporated into my life. And again, both my parents weren't born here, so they immigrated here into Canada. So a lot of the traditions they hold on to really tightly. So they want that to be implemented into their kids. They want their kids to to like demonstrate those qualities in that culture. So I think my parents do a great job in terms of again, like the food, the activities that we do, the games that we play. My dad likes to teach us the games that he used to play back home, and it's so hard. I can't grasp onto those games, but he tries to do those, and it really is fun. But it's a way to try to, again, bring in the two cultures and try to, again, they want us to keep both, but they really try their hard to implement that Somali culture into us. So I think those are, yeah.
Food, games, yeah, those are all excellent points. Yeah. And anyone, Sam?
Yeah, sure. I can. I think much of the, I guess, holidays or festivities that we celebrate. So many of the traditions that get associated with many of the kind of religious-based holidays are very culturally rooted. So we keep doing that. The food is a big thing, so that always draws the kids back to the nest, I think, for the food. So the food's important. And I think also a kind of communal discussion of politics and news that happens over coffee, very specific culturally Eritrean, Ethiopian, East African coffee routines. So I think these are some of the kinds of things that we do. And then I think also subsequent generations, I see also, I think I saw Alpha's name is here, but kind of the kinds of youth associations and youth community groups that we form that are based on shared cultures and being in diaspora is a big part of how we try to make sense of what's being passed on. So those are some of the things that we've done. And yes, Alpha has been a great community leader for me, so I'm always down to shout her out. So those are the kinds of ways that we've tried to do this kind of maintenance, even if that maintaining is not, it's never pure, right? It changes, it alters, it morphs, and it does different things. So those are the kinds of things that we do, I think.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think they take on new meaning as well, Sam. That's what you were saying as well, right? Things.
New meaning and new life, new energy, new
life. That's right. Absolutely, those are really excellent. But I like the emphasis on food. I mean, I'm Italian myself, so I mean, food for Italians is a huge part of culture as well, right? This idea, but it definitely brings back this idea of collectivity, I think. And you're right, like this idea of food, and I heard it in Kerito as well, right? This idea of food being crucial. And it relates back to the point you were making also, we were making earlier about this worldliness of Toronto as well, right? And this availability of the global. So in a sense, it's in this worldliness that there is that a possibility also to maintain those, I guess, for example, the food options, right? The possibility of actually being able to find them here. And it is through diasporic networks most of the times, I know, from this kind of diasporic networks like Endure, right? Globally as well. So that's really, really interesting points. Maybe let me move to the next question. So given a chance, would you want to return to your countries of origin, and why? This is a really interesting question, I think. I don't know if, I mean, it depends. I don't know if, do you consider your country of origin, especially for those born in Canada, for example? It'd be interesting to even know if you consider Canada your country of origin, or Somalia, or any other country from where your parents hail.
I think the question, I think a lot of the questions, we were born here, so a lot of these we're gonna kind of assume that our country of origin is meant to be where our parents are from. So I guess for me, I would 100% go back. I think growing up, you know, I've never actually been, but I actually do have plans to go this summer. Hopefully, if COVID and everything goes well, hopefully I can go back home and see what my parents lived through and experienced, and get a sense of their culture and my culture, because it is my culture. But 1000% would go back. And I think I need to prepare myself, because I've heard so many stories, but I just want to be properly equipped and ready to go back. Yeah.
Thanks, Kerito.
For me, I would 100%, I'd go back as well, because I've been before, and I would say it was a great experience. I learned so much of the culture, met so much family that I didn't know I had. Like, I just learned so many things that, like, when I left, I really missed it. Like, for the longest time, I wanted to go back. Like, it was just a great experience, and like being able to learn my culture, and like, because growing up in Canada, there was a lot that I learned, but being back home is just a better experience, because the Somali culture is all everybody knows. So it's like, I feel like it's much more better for me. And I really loved it and enjoyed it. So definitely I would go back.
Ikram, I have a question for you. Yeah. What is one thing that you would go, like, what's one thing that you miss?
Like, okay, so like at night you would play like these games, and like it was just so fun. And then we also rode camels all the time, so it was just so fun, and I really miss that.
Yeah, we definitely don't see camels here, so
yeah.
So what I'll do is I know that there's a few students actually from the DAB as well here on the call. So perhaps I'll extend the question to Dahabo. Are you there? Can you hear me? Dahabo. Dahabo? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good afternoon, Dahabo. Do you want me to repeat the question for you as well, so you can join in the conversation as well? So the question was, given a chance, would you want to return to your country of origin, and why?
Yes, me, I really like to go back with any means, because we have been here for almost 30 years in the camp. Being a refugee is very hard, but in any way, East and West home is the best. The reason that I like to go back to my home country is because as we live here, we lost the identity. So freedom of movement is not there. But reaching the border between Kenya and Ethiopia, I mean Kenya and Somalia, there's no one who asks you, where's your ID, where are you going? There's no much question about that, because people may say you that, welcome to your home. You feel that you are somewhere and you belong to. So I really like, because nowadays, and in this week we are in a dilemma, because the government of Kenya say that you should go back within 14 days. And before we used to ask, why are we going? Is there a place we can get security, health services, education, and many others? But due to the merging disputes in between Kenya and Somalia, people, they think that if we say no, maybe that piece of sea will go to the side of Kenya. It's better for us to go back to learn our country, because most Somalis, they have a beautiful culture, beautiful land, the largest sea in Africa, and many others. So as we came here, most of the generation, they may not understand the language. They speak only, they cannot write. That's the most challenges we experience. We speak, but we can't write mostly. So if we go back, we learn our Somali language, we learn our culture, because as Somali, we must value the camel, milk, and the other animals. And again, others also fishing, they are doing fishing, others also farming. When we are here, there's no farming, people, they sit home and like idle, there's no movement, there's no activity. We just depend the food that we got from the WFP and UNHCR, the support of UNHCR given by the refugees, that's the only. But if you go back to our home, we have the knowledge, everyone can go his or her hope to the activities he or she feels for. But here, there's nothing. We are working the less wage, but I could suggest in any way, either 2 years or 5 years, we wish to go back. Home is the best, east and west, home is the best. Whether you go to abroad, you've been in the refugees, home is home. Yeah.
Thank you, Dahabo, for it. Thank you, Dahabo. And I know that Mulid Mukhtar is here as well. I know, Mulid, did you want to add a few words to this specific question about returning to your country of origin? I have a hard time seeing everyone. Let's see. Okay, never mind. All right, well, perhaps there's issues with connectivity. That is often the case. So we'll perhaps we'll return to that question later on if Mukhtar returns as well. Thank you, Dahabo. And I think it's that juxtaposition of the voices, I think, was incredibly interesting. I think very powerful. Home is home, says Dahabo. I don't know if, and I think I heard that in a sense in what Kerto was saying and what Akram was saying as well, in different ways, right? So we can maybe move on to the next question, which is this is more perhaps for those of you who live obviously in Canada. And so how do Black students or students from East Africa cope with racism in Canada? And this is a very important question, I feel. And whoever wants to take the floor, I can't see everyone, unfortunately. So,
can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, I don't mind going.
Go for it, Sam. Yeah, go for it.
But maybe we can hear from Kurto, who started the first Black students group at MAC. If you could tell us, Kurto, maybe some of the motivations behind that, and then I can go after you.
Yeah. So again, I guess it's me being a first generation student, and on top of that, I didn't go to York. I'm a McMaster, so it is a bit far from home. So I guess not being like my entire life, I've been kind of around the same people. You kind of move from elementary school to middle school to high school together, and you kind of create that family amongst yourself. So going away from for school and being exposed to a complete, I mean, university itself is a completely new environment, but I guess kind of experiencing that on your own and not really having your family to kind of guide you through the way is definitely challenging. But I wouldn't personally say for me I've experienced racism in terms of the institution and all that, but it was just more so finding a place and people that I can connect with that essentially look like me, and I can relate with them, and I can kind of form that bond and friendship and relationship with them where I can further develop it through past university and then find people that I can relate to again. So I did meet a group of friends and students that were interested in. So it was a collective decision, and we were working as a team, of course. And it was a hard process. We had to figure out what was our values, what was our visions, what did we want to see from McMaster University, and how can we implement that? How can we see changes and kind of create a central hub for students of the Black students and people of color? But there are other associations and clubs and at McMaster that do focus on different things, whether it's Black aspiring physicians or engineers and nursing students. But I think essentially it was just bringing in all of those association and creating that space for people where they can identify through everything, whether it's through your program, through who you are as a person, culturally, traditionally, everything. Thank
you, Kirto. Sam, you wanted to maybe add a few comments you were saying?
For sure. Thank you so much, Kirto. That was helpful for me. I mean, I think the question is both a specific and a general one, I think. And how does one deal with racism? I think, how does one come to the realization that a system has been constructed or built without you being at its center? Yeah. So one deals with racism, how one deals with racism here or anywhere. Yeah. Come strategies, you either accept, you deny, you get more fortified in your position, you work harder, you do all of these things. You find allies, as Kirto did, you form associations and groups. So I think that all of that happens. How we try to work on that or infuse that philosophy or that idea of, quite frankly, if we can say anti-Black racism, this is the language we might use today, or the ways in which our young people might experience racism when they go to school, is very much why this organization in its original constitution, it's why it was founded. We saw that in the Northwest for maybe now we could say for the last 20 years. We've been working for 10 years at Success Beyond Limits, is that Black students, be they from the Horn or from the continent or from the Caribbean, weren't graduating at the same rate as other students. And while we don't at SBL hold graduation as a gold standard or a metric as its sole metric of success, it is an indication of what our young people are facing. So SBL in of itself has always been, as Tess said, not simply an organization or a nonprofit or a charity, but an actual community-based movement to try to, one, build awareness, then build advocacy, then resist, and then perhaps engage in various forms of activism. So we infuse that into our summer program, which is the 6-week program where we have young people that come from the 8th grade who come into SBL. What we didn't mention is that we also focus on students who are, by definition of the system or the school, that the processes that they've been experiencing, don't see themselves as successful students. So before they enter high school, we actually infuse in them an idea that they are students, that they're successful, that they're smart, the communities they come from, it's knowledge-based, all of the kinds of things that we try to, the word might be unlearn or unpack what they've always been told and what they've experienced. So we actually very often work with students who might not be the ones called on to be defined as leaders or future aces, or these kinds of things we do to identify successful students. And we work with them. We hire teachers who have patients, who may have similar life background experiences, who may come from communities like them, and we work with curriculum that tells them, that centers Jane and Finch, that centers York, that centers the campus, so that they can start to imagine themselves as successful students. And then we also through that work that we do together, they get a high school credit in advance of high school. And this very important metric that we have that tells us 16 credits by the age of 16 is very important. So we work with that. And then we're in the school. So any kinds of disciplinary related issues, any issues with schooling, any issues with specific teachers, SBL is an actual youth space that is inside Westview, but it's not ground in the TDSB or in school policies. Very often we can mitigate or we can redirect the kinds of processes that we're all come aware, right? 20% less students graduate, 80% more Black students get expelled or suspended. This is very much the case. And I know my supervisor is here and he would bemoan if I don't say this. These are not structural solutions. Yeah, this is a stopgap, a way for us to help our people, our kids in our community as much as we can, but it is not a solution by which the entire system may be rectified. But we are hyper-local, we work in our community. I think we do what we do well, and we've done it how we've done it for the last 10 years. It takes that long sometimes to see the kinds of work, the effects of the kinds of work that we provide, right? So we provide critical mentorship, high school students who are able to work with grade 9 students who come in, and they could let them know about the kinds of things they need to be looking out for, which happens at the university level, in which Curto helped produce this Black Student Union. So I think those are the kinds of things that we're mindful of when we try to do the work that we do. And I think now we're starting to see these, school boards, universities engage in these kinds of institutional-wide anti-Black racism plans for the kinds of things people in community have been saying for a long time. So we will see where that goes. We will see the future direction. But I think the work that we've been able to do has been something that's been effective in this school community. And then we'll see how we go from there. I don't know if Tessa, you want to add anything?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think, yeah, I think Sam said much of what I would have said in terms of even the origins of the organization comes out of the ways that Black students have experienced schooling, right? And that is a product of anti-Black racism, and that's what East Africans are also facing across the school board, right? So this was I think it was in 2008 or 2006, where we were looking at kind of the alarming kind of dropout rates in our community and our local schools, and the work that comes out of those conversations of building something from the ground to say, how do we at least mitigate some of these experiences and structures that Black students are up against, right? And so that's how SBL is formed from the ground in terms of coming directly out of community, but also building bridges and connections across different systems, right? Whether it's the partnerships we've built with York University, or whether it's partnerships with the TDSB, but of course, always understanding we're not of the institution, right? We're working with them, but we have to understand that the work that we do, it's critical to understand that at the root of it, we have to be accountable to community, right? To young folks. That's how we're first and foremost accountable to. And that brings much tension in the work that we do, right? And many times with our partners that are from larger institutions where we see the displays of kind of, anti-Black racism, whether it's within policies or whether it's in the ways in which the education system is kind of rolled out and working for Black students or not working for Black students. And so I think at the root of it, anti-Black racism really is at the root of the work that we do and how the organization has kind of been built.
Can I follow up with that?
Absolutely, Sam. Absolutely. Please,
yeah,
please.
I think I see Yuka's question. I'll read it out just for accessibility purposes. Could the panelists speak to the tensions around school being a site of surveillance, while also held up as a way to succeed, in quotes, as an immigrant? How do they support individuals to navigate this? So yes, entirely. The school is a site of surveillance. I think we could all point to the very recent histories of just up until now, actually, still happening, still unfolding, of police in schools. I mean, long before that, school has been a site of surveillance for specifically Black and racialized kids in a very hyper-intensified way, specifically for young people in Jane and Finch. Yes. So really quickly, just for folks who are not aware, but the kind of history of police in schools is a peculiar one, but it is not. If we think about the larger history of how Black youth have been kind of policed in Toronto, So unfortunately, early 2000s, a young Black boy died inside of a school, got shot inside of a school. It launched a kind of fury across the country, I mean, internationally. And then the province engaged in a two-year kind of community consultation research process, right? So we were all community workers, younger community workers. Remember, we participated in these consultations. We went to all the meetings. We were all quite young and naive. 2 years, the ministry is producing this report. It's called the Roots of Youth Violence Report. About 44 plus recommendations come out of it. It's over 450 pages. All of the kinds of things that it spoke about that we kind of really, it rolls off our tongue now. Racism in the community, access to fresh groceries, walkability, transportation, racism in schools, all these things that now seem like we can really say them very easily, but that's what that report produced. The very tangible thing that came out of it, the policy, was police in schools. And the police were placed in schools by which the police already had fraught relationships with the community. So surprisingly, in Jane and Finch, where that original boy died in a tragic death, we got police in schools, right? And this is very much the response that the city gives when crime happens. It's to flood the place with more police, yeah? So what we started to observe, and this program, we resisted it, we fought it before it was constituted. Then police chief Blair said, I don't have social workers, I have police officers, I don't know what you want. So this meant fully uniformed, fully armed police officers in school. And that really became to be detrimental effects. So while it was already a site of surveillance, it became a site of carcerality, of policing. Our young people, things that were fights that we could redirect at SBL. Maybe they could, instead of a suspension, instead of an expulsion, the officer had to respond with charges. And this is the kinds of stuff that happened. So these are the kinds of policy tools, and very quite simple. Material, yes.
Very material, I would say so.
They altered young people's futures, but they're also blunt, unsophisticated solutions, yeah? So we've been pushing, and the kinds of work that we've done, just to speak to Yuka's point, is that we worked with, or we fought it, resisted it, we kept track of the kinds of stories that were happening in schools where principals didn't know who was in charge, and police were, they're officers of the keepers of the peace. They have to respond with the penal code. So we started to see that a lot of young people started having, picking up, these kind of little charges, being suspended, being expelled, being caught up in the criminal justice system. We're supporting them, became a whole hassle. But when the work, when it came to a head that maybe policing might not be the solution we want to have to these kinds of problems, SBL, we worked with many community groups and the board in their review of the program, and had to bring some of these stories to the fore. And the Ontario Human Rights Commission was involved. And we really had to start to get the system to see, the school board, the trustees, and society really, to see that the 5,000 students, Black racialized students who were most adversely affected by policing, needed to be at the forefront of this decision if we're going to keep police in schools. Not the 240,000 some odd that would not be affected, right? And so I think those are some of the work that we did. And also to Yuka's point, by having SBL uniquely located in the school, in some ways, we can also keep an eye on the school. We can also serve this. In the research that we did with SBL, our students don't see our youth space as being in the school while it's in the school. It's not of the school, as Tess used that language. So we're able to kind of, the teachers are able to, and the administration is able to see that SBL is there, and to imagine that there might be something else other than what my training and what this board has told me that I should do, right? Because as we teach teachers, college students, there is a wide berth between what is policy and what is established practice, right? And SBL, I don't know if we want to use this language, Tess, I've never thought of it, but it's kind of like counter surveillance. Like you can also be in the school, be right there when young people might need, and we're there to mitigate. And our awesome staff member, Shanaz, is very good at advocating for all of our kids in the school office with superintendents. And we're able to serve as a stopgap, as a procedure. But we also, very much to Yuka's question, help our students to understand that they are always under watch at the school. So that's also something by which they should operate in that mode.
Those are all incredible points, and I think the tension that was very visible in all of your points, especially in your last points as well. This tension between wanting to do something in the immediate, but also acknowledging that this is not a structural response, right? It's not a structural response, and actually most of the times structural responses are very blunt, very material, like you said, Sam, are very blunt, and they reinforce those very same perceptions again with this very same labels and perceptions that SBL is trying to work against, in this idea of trying to think about success, right? What it means to be successful. And those small charges, all of that violence, right, against specific bodies is at the heart really of whatever it means to be unsuccessful in a sense. Or then we can have, obviously, I think SBL does a good job of rethinking that as well. But I want to move the conversation a little bit further because A, because in the interest of time, and B, also because we were also speaking about COVID-19, and that theme hasn't emerged yet in a sense from our conversation right now. So in a sense, I mean, we have a few questions on that, but really I think the question is, how has COVID-19 affected your schooling and work life? But also, since we are speaking about disciplining and policing, right? So in a sense, perhaps we can speak to specific bodies, right? Specific identities. We can also speak to how COVID-19 has aggravated all of this. And perhaps you can speak to the experiences through SBL and your own personal experiences of schooling and work life, I think. And then I'll open the floor in this sense to all of you, whoever wants to start off and continue.
Yeah, I can start off. So as a grade 12 student, it's my last year in high school, being in like school being closed and like everything switched to online was kind of hard for me at first because I wasn't used to it, and I'm used to I'm a in-person learner, so like I like sitting down in a classroom learning face to face and being able to ask questions, but I feel like when we're online it's I don't really get much of a chance. So it's like being in grade 12 my last year, I want to have a great experience. I want to leave the high school being able to attend graduation, go to prom, and many other things, participate in school sports team or after school curriculums. And I feel like COVID-19 has really affected me in that way for my grade 12 year. And for me, I just learned to kind of move past it and trying to make the experience, even though we're in COVID-19, I try to make the experience better for me, and yeah, in my own way.
I can add on as well. I guess I'm in my last year of university. So I think when it comes to COVID, and there's a lot of different aspects of my life that have been affected, whether that's, school, social interactions, personal, physical and mental health. But I guess for me personally, just learning online, that whole aspect was, I guess, new for everyone, even new for me as well. So trying to grasp onto concepts, and I guess there's so many distractions when you're learning in your bedroom. You do so many things. You sleep in your bedroom, you sometimes eat, you work, but trying to do school in your bedroom is definitely a different aspect. So I guess for me, professors have really done a good job in trying to incorporate recordings and being able to go back onto lectures and trying to rewatch and grasp onto things that are important. But definitely very hard when it comes to the actual learning process. And on top of that, being on my last year, your GPA matters. So when you want to apply for master's programs, you need to have you have to be an outstanding student. So on top of trying to maintain my mental health and my physical health and trying to reach out to friends and maintain those social interactions and the relationships that you have to worry about school now. Because before it was okay, I'm going to go 9 to 5 or 9 to 3. I'm going to go to school. And then you it's dust off your hands. After 3 o'clock, it's I'm done with school. And then you kind of have that other opportunity other time to do other things and take care of yourself. So now it's it's school and taking care of yourself and eating and trying to do all of that at once. It's a daunting experience, but I guess, you know, we're in some unprecedented times. No one really expected this. So I feel like being able to adapt to this situation and trying to figure out what works best for me, and is what we're all learning how to do, even for me. So yeah.
I guess just really quickly, maybe to give an idea of kind of the global view of Jane and Finch. It's one of the it's a really high concentration of the kinds of folks that can't do the work at home. So essential workers got to go to work, factories, personal support care workers. So the kind of work that needs to happen in person. And so it's been a lot of work around the kind of organizing work that we've been thinking about, is how to kind of advocate for more buses on the route, so the buses aren't so crowded when folks are going to work. Also testing, mobile testing, and then vaccine sites. We're still one of the we have the least amount of vaccine sites. Our vaccine site just opened this week, actually, and we're with another community organization that we work with. We're making calls to elders and folks. It's very difficult to get to the vaccine sites. A lot of folks crowded. So that's the kind of reality. But I mean, again, it's just a exacerbated picture of the kinds of things, that the dynamics that make up a community like Jane and Finch. It's kind of just magnified more in a pandemic, which was the same during SARS. We learned these kinds of lessons during SARS, but I guess we're learning them again together.
Despite, you want to add anything or go for it?
Sure. I think for us, thinking about the pandemic and just thinking about the work that we do, when, you know, initially schools were shut down, our immediate thoughts were, how do we continue to support young people without a physical space in which they can come and get the supports they've traditionally been able to do? And thinking about beyond that, what are the needs of our community? What are their immediate needs in order for them to continue to engage in their own education? And of course, as been reported much in Toronto and across the province, one of the barriers to education when it goes virtual is just even having access to the required technology to engage in that, right? So looking at simple things like, you know, or having a laptop to do so, having, you know, sufficient internet connections, I'm sure, which through the work that you guys do, you guys know that's a real challenge, you know, even the refugees in Dadaab, for sure. And I mean, we're experiencing that here too, right? I'm sure it's happening to a different degree, but that was some of the work that we had to do very early on, right? And you know, working with the local school board, working with other organizations as well, it was really about ensuring that those needed resources were coming into our community. And then as we were working with them, they weren't happening fast enough, right? There were a lot of students that were being left behind. And so we had to look also internally at what we can do in terms of reallocating resources we had for certain things in order to just meet the basic necessity and the basic needs of students and families. And so for us, it's really shifted the work that we do to just getting laptops out to families, getting them internet connection, getting them the basic essentials around, you know, whether it's just groceries that they need to get. And many families have had family members and parents that have been laid off, have been impacted by COVID itself, have been off for work for weeks. And so what that's meant is to say, we need to also look at what can we do to support them through this, right? And and a part of that has been giving out, you know, monthly grocery gift cards. And we've never done this before, right? So it's really shifted the work that we do and looking at what are the needs and how do we address that? And how do we take the resources that were, you know, we're supposed to be used in a particular way, working with our partners to say, we really need to change that and really just get dollars out the door to families so we can just meet their basic needs. And so that's kind of shifted our work. And so that was we laid the foundation down to be able to say, at least the students can get online, at least they have the internet connection, where we're addressing some of their immediate basic needs. And then that's when we actually started to look at, okay, then now how do we support students educationally in the ways that we've done in the past? But it was really at the beginning to get just the basic essentials out to families. And even now still though.
I think just to jump on the end of that, I also work with the Black Creek Community Farm, who shifted operations to provide grocery boxes, emergency groceries at the beginning of the pandemic, and the demand has been beyond our imagination, and we work, grow, study this community a lot. So all that to say is that, again, that we also have a provincial and city and federal government that might have also be able to provide these things. But again, we had on the ground see these things shift operations, but it also makes glaringly obvious the kinds of structural, disinvestment, marginalization that communities like this one predictably face. So just to point that out.
It's that word, right? Resilience, sometimes, that I find very troubling, in a sense that it's a two-edged sword, right? It's great to see, but at the same time, where does the policy side step in as well, right? And I think we've seen not necessarily a lack of that necessarily, but a lack for specific targeted communities, I think, or as you were pointing out before as well, and through everything that you guys were saying, right? That there's that aspect of which policies then get generated from, even when these voices are heard sometimes, what are the policies that get generated? Because we spoke about that earlier. I wanted to just sort of disrupt a little bit our own perspectives by trying to bring in Okidi from the DAB. Okidi, are you there? Can you hear me? I wonder whether if you can give us a perspective of how learning and schooling and work has been impacted there in the camps because of COVID and because of the shutdowns and the lockdowns that have happened as a result of COVID, as well as the oftentimes budgetary limits because of the donor pooling their funds, right? As well, there's the element as well. I mean, again, different but similar in many ways, these patterns, right, that we're exploring in conversation. Okidi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, please. I can hear you. Thank you very much, Bwana Micro, for giving me this time. I'm really very grateful. First of all, before I answer the question you asked, I wanted to comment on the reply given by our bosses on the other side, because I was the one who raised the question about discrimination and all those things that were taking place on the other side, either in Canada or in America, because over the news and over the films, we used to see many bad things that were really going on. And we felt, as you see, like Canada itself is one of the countries which is full of elites, because the majority of the people of Canada are people who have degree or higher certificates. And that's one thing that is very good. And I know people, once they are learned, the way they do things, the way they look at things are different. And then being a light has to change the community. And that's why we raised that question. So as I come back to the learning center within this pandemic era, in fact, it has affected us a lot because all the schools were closed. Girls who were supposed to be in schools where most of them were impregnated. They became mothers, and even bad enough, even during the KCPE that has happened last week, some of them even passed away during exams period because of child labor and other things. Those are the bad part of it. Also, it affected us generally because going to the center was a better option. But now you could not go there because there was a lockdown. And the learning was to go online. And within this online learning, we had challenges because like at home, you have children, you have the family, you have domestic issues. Sometimes you can't concentrate on studies, even if studies is very important, is on one side, but the challenges that you go through were so many, and we have to push all the two at once, so that because learning is very important, it is your future. So that's how we have been battling with it, and we are grateful that now the lockdown has been released, uplifted, and now we are partially back to the learning center, and we expect if all goes well, when we shall be having our professors back with us, and we shall be having a face-to-face learning, we shall be very happy. But that time, God knows. So that's how we are in, and we are really very grateful for giving us time and for hearing our voice and for giving us the feedback, a very valuable one that we really appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Okidi. And I don't know if I heard a lot of echoes in what Okidi was saying with, for example, what Kerto was saying initially as well about the difficulties of working from home. I mean, from working and learning from home. And I heard a lot of echoes with what Tesfaye was saying and Sam were saying as well about the difficulties of just the structural difficulties, right? Infrastructural difficulties as well, these challenges that happen as well. I don't know if any of you want to respond or sort of chime in and build on what Okidi just said as well. Or any more, in a sense, any other comments that you wanted to make?
I think to touch on, I think Yuka's question in the chat around, I think around the kinds of ways we see how data gets used to, I think very much scapegoat, Jane and Finch, you know, Scarborough, Region Bar, these kinds of communities where these very intensified populations of Black and racialized, you know, people of color live and congregate, both, I guess, in similar ways around SARS and COVID, as, you know, really seeing these kinds of language around, oh, the hotspot, don't go there, danger, stigma, that kind of stay away. So that messaging has been very much consistent, yeah? And then the ideas around the kinds of mobile community testing and to be a good, responsible citizen is to go get tested and then go get the vaccine, go. And then I think very often the messaging or the way in which these kinds of communities get handled is condescending and patronizing, right? And also that they can't make rational decisions. They can't be questioning critical sets of people who have, you know, generations and histories of knowledge that comes and it's valid. So these are the kinds of things you see, right? Very, you know, and then also with maybe even the kind of municipal political leadership of the kind of, well, why aren't these people listening to us kind of, and that's generally probably across the board, but also that in those areas where it's hot, don't go there, they're doing something wrong at being and living from Toronto. So I think those are the kinds of ways those messaging gets, and then also let's be very, very honest that when we did have a working, functioning hospital at the center of our community, literally right across the street from Westview, there's been a set of historical experiences that Black and racialized folks from Jane and Finch don't necessarily go there and always find care and always receive the care that they need. So that's generally global pandemic times. And then I guess the skepticism and the cynicism, rational, scientific, considered, comes from the idea that, well, I've never received what I would call care from the medical system here. So why would I take this instruction on face value? Yeah. And we have, of course, reams of data that tells us about what Black women and Black communities, Black youth's experience have been when they go to the doctor.
And I think, Sam, thank you for those last points, because in many ways you've answered some of the remaining questions. And thank you for moderating the Q&A from the participants as well, actually. I was going to get to this question, but you anticipated that. And I like how you threaded in with the other conversations that we were having. Let's see I want to see if there's any other questions from participants. I don't think I see any other ones apart from those that you have already taken up. Anyone wants, in the meantime, does anyone, Tesfaye, Ekram or Kerti, do you want to add any comments to the question that Sam has already sort of put on the table for us from the board? So basically this idea of hotspots and this discourse of hotspots, right? And at the same time, responsible citizens and how it plays on to, I guess, earlier discourses, historical discourses that also play on similar patterns of marginalization, really, and similar patterns of targeting, right, specific neighborhoods and policing specific neighborhoods, and how that goes hand in hand with that structural disinvestment, I think, that Sam and Tesfaye were speaking about. Tesfaye, I see you've unmuted, so please jump in.
Sure, no, I'll just add to what Sam's been saying, and I think he's already mentioned it. I think there's the one hand in which the ways that these communities are being spoken about or spoken to as well. And then on the other side, the structural element that we've kind of discussed, if we know that particular neighborhoods in our city are hotspots for COVID, and we haven't done anything structurally to change that, maybe we need to change the conversation. So for example, and I think Sam had already mentioned it, the idea that there's this idea of transit, and transit particularly not necessarily being safe to take during this time, and it's something that's being said by the TTC, right, and by those that work at the city. Understanding that, you know, in our neighborhood, you have transit is a large part of how people get around the city. And so if you know that buses were overcrowded before the pandemic, and it's been an issue beforehand, and now we are in a pandemic, and there's this understanding of, you know, needing to distance and spacing for people to be able to stay safe and not contract the virus, there hasn't been much that's been done on that front, right? So we're looking at, you know, maybe increasing busing, increasing the numbers that are on each route. And one thing that's, you know, in my research, in my graduate work, when I was doing research around our community, one of the things that I learned was that, you know, Jane, the transit line on Jane, and also the one on Finch, are the two of the top three busiest transit corridors. The only one that was more busy was the King streetcar, right? And so that has been an issue that for many years, I would say over a decade. And so during a pandemic, we know that, you know, we need people to physically distance, but we haven't done anything to change that, right? Even just the idea of increasing busing. Sam's already talked about the idea of vaccination and not having really any pharmacies that are doing mass vaccinations in our community or having a large vaccination site. And you know, this is a hotspot, so there's nothing being done there. You have schools that are open and students are going to, and you have a community where there has been massive transmission, but there hasn't been a change in the ways that, a large change in the ways that classrooms are structured in terms of sizing, the use of space, maybe looking at different spaces outside of just the local high school, looking at other public spaces in order to make use of that for the education of young people. That hasn't been done, right? So there's so many examples of how our community continues to be neglected structurally. And so the conversation around looking at, you know, maybe the responsibilities of people from our community, ensuring that they're adhering to maybe public health guidelines, when those public health guidelines don't take into considerations the way that their lives are structured. So I think that that's really important to look at and flip it back to the province and to municipalities and saying, like, you've neglected our community for many years and continue to do so through a pandemic, right? And we see that has not changed, and people are literally dying. So it really speaks to how, you know, a highly racialized community, a community that has a large East African population, has a large population of Black folks, continues to be structurally neglected.
And yeah, that's fine. I think, I mean, you mentioned death. I mean, that is one of the greatest impacts on communities, right? Like the sheer number of deaths, right, and mourning as well. And that's something that already in a sense already paints the discourse quite well. I think. I mean, it already gives a sense of the urgency and the emergency as well of interventions. And absolutely, I think we're about to close. We're almost heading to closure. So I did want to, I have a question in a sense for all of you, and it's a difficult question in a sense. So perhaps there are no immediate responses, but I did want to pose it, and I did want to also pose it to Okidi, who's in the DAB as well, because he did mention the importance of learning, the importance of education, right? So in a sense, and this is a question that comes out of my own research as well, because in the work I do with Bear, I'm really thinking about the way that education is both a form of resistance, and like a space of resistance to specific marginalization, as well as the way it is implicated in, and we've seen this in our conversation, it's already played out in many ways, the ways it is implicated in the creation of marginalization and injustice and inequalities, both local and global. But we've seen how these local and global, at the end of the day, they interact in many ways, right? I mean, there is no separation really. Our communities are international, and at the same time, issues that happen on a local basis can be extended, and these patterns can be extended globally as well to understand the issues and challenges that are faced elsewhere. So my question is, what is the role of education? What do you see as the role of education in all of this? Like and again, I know it's a huge question. It's a vast question, and there's many ways of thinking about this. But to leave it with some hope, right? To leave this conversation with some hope, and I do think that oftentimes hope is found in education, and I guess that all the work that you do speaks to that in many ways, right? So, in thinking about education, or maybe thinking about education differently, not just based on individual success, but in different ways as well. But in a sense, what can education do in this? And I know it's super broad, it's super huge, and I realize that, but it just, if you want to speak to that, and then perhaps we can end it there with a few comments from everyone. And I did want to hear from Okidi as well, if he's still able to after as well. So perhaps we can start with Okidi if he's still there. Okidi, can you hear me? Perhaps he's. Okay, so since I cannot hear Okidi, whoever wants to take the floor from here in Toronto, so it's either Akram or Kerto, Sam, or Tesfai, whoever wants to go for it, and if speak to this question or somehow respond. I don't know.
Ikram, Kurto, you can tell me what can education do, and then I'll go after you guys.
Okay, I can go. I think education and learning. I think as you're growing up, it's definitely something where it's kind of a hard topic to discuss, because it's like education can mean so many things. And in my house, it's like education is going to get you a job. Education is what you kind of need to, it's instilled into you. Like, you need to go to post-secondary. If you're not going to post-secondary, you're not going to be able to get a job. But, and post-secondary education is very important. But I've realized that it's not just post-secondary education that can get you there. There's so many different routes that you can take. But to me personally, it's definitely, I don't know, it's I don't know, Ikram, if you have something to add, it's something, again, that my parents have instilled into me. It's something that I've been working on my whole life. I've always been in school, and I'm very grateful for that, because of the different aspects of life that people don't get that opportunity to be in school their whole lives. So it kind of puts pressure into something like you have to make something out of it. And right now I'm kind of in a situation where it's like, I've been in school for 4 years and I don't really know what my degree holds in terms of what kind of jobs I can get with my degree. So it kind of pushes me to go into more schooling. And again, that's more money coming out of my pocket that I have to pay for. So it's very difficult in terms of, I understand the value of education and how important it is for my life, and me being in Canada, how important that is. But also, how do I use that, and how do I use my education to the best of my abilities, and what I've used and learned throughout my whole life to make a career out of that. So again, like my parents' definition of education, my definition of education, it can go hand in hand, but I think, I don't know, it's it's definitely a tricky topic. When you talk about the value of education, what does learning mean to me and education mean to me? I think it's different for everybody. And yeah, I don't know, to Sam.
Thanks, good.
Okay, may I pick
Sorry
up?
if I put you on the spot. I know this wasn't in the question.
Don't worry, it's okay.
But you've answered it well. I think you've given a really good answer. I think anyone else wants to also check in?
Yeah. One micro. I wanted to
yes, okay.
A slight comment. In fact, what I would say about education on my side is that education is something very important. And once you're educated, you have to give back to the community. The community will be looking at you as a solution, the first solution. And it is very important that somebody who is learned, who is educated, should do the right thing in the community so that he is viewed positively. There are some people who are really educated. They have degrees, they have a lot of certificates. But when it comes to the community, they do very little, or they do the opposite. That means your education it's not helping the community, or it's not for the right thing. So once you are educated, number one, the community, who is the grassroots, the people, who is the common people, they look at you. And once you are able to change their lifestyle, to solve a lot of issues among themselves, at least you are viewed as somebody who's really learned. And according to us in here in Dadaab, the BHR courses that we are given, we are really very grateful because it has enlightened us. It has given us a lot of insight into many things. When it comes to community issues, you are there to give guidance. You are there to give at least a way out. And what people appreciate is what you give back to them. But in case they don't appreciate anything, then it means the education that you've acquired is of no use. Some people end up drinking. Once you are drunk, you are not even able to do anything. You cannot reason properly. So what I request is, let us, we as learned people, we should be focused. We should do the right thing that can help the community move forward, but not backward. This is what I said. I said this education that we have gotten from here has really helped us a lot, and we are very grateful to York and UNHCR and all the agencies that has really supported us in acquiring this education. Thank you.
Thank you, Okidi. So I hear a lot about this, the link between education and community, and what you were saying, basically the importance of also going back to community. But I don't know if Sam, I think Sam and Tesfaye and Ekram as well, right? I don't know if you want to add any final comments to this.
I can actually comment just quickly. Thank you, Okidi, for your comment. But I think one thing that stood out to me was bringing back your knowledge and your education back into the community. And I think SBL as a whole does that a lot. And we start to see teachers and who have grown up, Sam, Tesfaye, they're all educators who have grown up in the Jane and Finch community and have made a career out of bringing back and teaching the younger generations and inspiring them to, you know, complete your education, go through university, post-secondary, college, trades, whatever it is. So I think for me, even personally, I'm just in my last year of university, so I'm still learning. But I have been a part of programmings and things that programs that, so for example, they've started a post-secondary mentorship program where people like me who are in my 3rd and 4th year of university are now teaching and inspiring, giving tips and tricks to mentees and mentors who are in grade 11 and 12 and kind of helping them with the whole application process, things that they want help with the university. So it's me kind of taking an aspect of things that I've learned from university, so an aspect of education in a way, and bringing it back into my community. So I think it's very important to, obviously knowledge is power. Like the more that you're able to learn about your life and about who you are and about the world, the more that you can inspire other people to do the same. So I think it's very important. I think SBL does a great job in trying to implicate that and try to inspire others to do the same as well.
Wonderful response. Thank you so much, Kurt. Okay, Sam, really quickly. Go.
I think we should not often confuse schooling with education. Education happens in places much farther than the classroom. But I think but we often get to do education in classrooms. And these are one of the very few places in society where we get to sit down for maybe 3 hours or a day and talk ideas and maybe think about genuine curiosity, wonder, and maybe changing the world. I don't think that's naive anymore, but thinking of a different world because we're maladjusted or we don't want this one. So maybe that's what I think education can do. So thank you.
I think I'll leave it at that. Those are wonderful words to close with. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tesfaye. Thank you, Ekram. Thank you, Kerto. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kidi. Thank you, Rachel, Malade. Thank you to those who organized it, who made it possible. And I think if there is something about education, I think we've witnessed it here in this very moment, how he encounters the thinking of ideas, like you put it, Sam. I think that is crucial to creating a new world, in the sense of creating new worlds, new possibilities. And so thank you so much to SBL, and thank you to everyone again. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope you keep safe and healthy. And I think that's all for today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Mirko.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.